Hi, my name is Mason Funk, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Outwards Archive, also known as Outwards.
Hi, Ralph Bruneau here. I'm a psychotherapist from Los Angeles and was also Mr. International Leather 2017.
Ralph and I want to welcome you to this screening of CURED, an extraordinary documentary about the secret campaign by a courageous group of mental health professionals and others to get the American Psychiatric Association to remove homosexuality from their Bible of diseases, the so-called DSM. I'm personally thrilled and honored that Ralph agreed to share this screening of CURED with his extended worldwide community to build support for Outwards and the Born Perfect campaign.
I got involved in the mental health field in the late 80s as a hospice worker for the Shanti Foundation. I then went on to get my master's and doctorate in clinical psychology. This was just a decade after homosexuality was removed from the DSM. As a clinician, I believe that mental health and politics are still very much inextricably linked. I was one of the founders of California Therapists for Marriage Equality. I serve on the board of the Los Angeles Gender Center and have been a fierce advocate for Born Perfect and the ban on conversion therapy for minors. As International Mr. Leather, I was able to travel all over the world raising awareness and funds for Born Perfect. This T is one of my campaigns. Whether it's our psyche, our relationships, our gender expression, or the mental health of our queer kids, the integrity of our very beings has always been political. I'm so honored to help spread the important message of this film that we are and have always been born perfect.
Thank you, Ralph. And as for Outwards, we are an LA-based nonprofit with a very simple mission: to record the stories of LGBTQ plus elders across the United States. Stories like the ones you're about to see in CURED, and those of countless other brave, resilient pioneers who challenged entrenched institutions and attitudes from the ground up towards LGBTQ people and helped build our movement and our community from the ground up. Find us online at theoutwardsarchive.org. That's theoutwardsarchive.org. Please support our work as well as the Born Perfect campaign at bornperfect.org.
Lastly, we'd like to invite you to join a live panel discussion about the documentary CURED, sponsored by Outwards, on Thursday, April 8th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. You'll receive an email on the morning of the 8th with Zoom details.
And if you're watching this message after April 8th, you can still catch a recording of the Q&A on Show and Tell. Go to the same link where you bought your ticket, click on the Q&A tab, and then click on the orange button to watch the panel discussion.
Thank you for your time. And now, without further ado, we present CURED.
Okay, awesome. So let's just keep going. I actually had one bobble, which I will hopefully correct the second time around, but for now, I'm gonna pin you. And we're still recording. So let me get my pages in position. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hi, my name is Mason Funk, and I'm founder and executive director of the Outwards Archive, also known as Outwards.
Hi, Ralph Bruneau here. I'm a psychotherapist from Los Angeles and was also International Mr. Leather 2017.
Ralph and I want to welcome you to this screening of CURED, an extraordinary documentary about the secret campaign by a courageous group of mental health professionals and others to get the American Psychiatric Association to remove homosexuality from their Bible of diseases, the so-called DSM. I'm personally thrilled and honored that Ralph agreed to share this screening of CURED with his extended worldwide community to build support for Outwards and the Born Perfect campaign.
I got involved in the mental health field in the late 80s as a hospice worker for the Shanti Foundation. I then went on to get my master's and my doctorate in clinical psych. This was just over a decade after homosexuality was removed from the DSM. As a clinician, I believe that mental health and politics are still very much inextricably bound. I was one of the founders of California Therapists for Marriage Equality. I serve on the board of the Los Angeles Gender Center and have been a fierce advocate for Born Perfect and the ban on conversion therapy for minors. As International Mr. Leather, I was able to travel all over the world raising awareness and funds for Born Perfect. This T is one of my campaigns. Whether it's our psyche, our relationships, our gender expression, or the mental health of our queer kids, The integrity of our very beings has always been political. I'm so honored to help spread the important message of this film that we are and have always been born perfect.
And as for Outwards, we are an LA-based nonprofit with a very simple mission: to record the stories of LGBTQ elders across the United States. Stories like the ones you're about to see in CURED, and those of countless other brave, resilient pioneers who challenged entrenched institutions and attitudes towards LGBTQ people and helped to build our extraordinary movement and community from the ground up. Find us online at theoutwardsarchive.org. That's theoutwardsarchive.org. Please support our work as well as the Born Perfect campaign at bornperfect.org.
Lastly, we'd like to invite you to join a live panel discussion about the documentary Cured, sponsored by Outwards, on Thursday, April 8th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. You'll receive an email in the morning of the 8th with Zoom details.
And if you're watching this message after April 8th, you can still catch a recording of the Q&A on Show and Tell. Go to the same link where you bought your ticket, click on the Q&A tab, and then click on the orange button to watch the panel discussion.
Thank you for your time. And now, without further ado, we present Cured.
Okay, excellent. And then last but not least, I will pin myself, and I'll try not to watch myself on camera.
I haven't been able to see anything. It's delicious.
Okay. So let's just go 3, 2, 1. Hello, my name is Mason Funk, and I'm founder and executive director of the Outwards Archive, also known as Outwards.
Hi, Ralph Bruneau here. I'm a psychotherapist from Los Angeles and was International Mr. Leather 2017.
Ralph and I want to welcome you to this screening of Cured, an extraordinary documentary about the secret campaign by a courageous group of mental health professionals and others to get the American Psychiatric Association to remove homosexuality from their Bible of diseases, the so-called DSM. I am personally thrilled and honored that Ralph agreed to share this screening of Cured with his extended worldwide community to build support for Outwards and the Born Perfect campaign.
I got involved in the mental health field in the late 80s as a hospice worker for the Shanti Foundation. I then went on to get my master's and doctorate in clinical psychology. This was just over a decade after homosexuality was removed from the DSM. As a clinician, I believe that mental health and politics are still very much inextricably bound. I was one of the founders of California Therapists for Marriage Equality. I serve on the board of the Los Angeles Gender Center and have been a fierce advocate for Born Perfect and the ban on conversion therapy for minors. As International Mr. Leather, I was able to travel all over the world raising awareness and funds for Born Perfect. This T is one of my campaigns. Whether it's our psyche, our relationships, our gender expression, or the mental health of our queer kids, the integrity of our very beings has always been political. I'm so honored to help spread the important message of this film that we are and always have been born perfect.
And as for Outwards, we are an LA-based nonprofit with a very simple mission: to record the stories of LGBTQ pioneers and elders across the United States. Stories like the ones you're about to watch in Cured, and those of countless other brave, resilient pioneers who challenged entrenched institutions and attitudes towards LGBTQ people and helped build our extraordinary community and movement from the ground up. Find us online at theoutwardsarchive.org. That's theoutwardsarchive.org. And please support us as well as the Born Perfect campaign at bornperfect.org.
Lastly, we'd like to invite you to join a live panel discussion about the documentary Cured, sponsored by Outwards, on Thursday, April 8th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. You'll receive an email on the morning of the 8th with Zoom details.
And if you're watching this message after April 8th, you can still catch a recording of the Q&A on Show and Tell. Go to the same link where you bought your ticket, click on the Q&A tab, and then click on the orange button to watch the panel discussion.
Thank you for your time. And now, without further ado, we present Cured.
So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the live Q&A for the documentary film Cured in collaboration with Outwards. We have a really exciting conversation planned for you and we thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lex. My pronouns are they, them. I'm going to be your tech person for the session. So if you need any support throughout, you can just look for the word tech in the participants tab and you can shoot me a message and I will do my best to help you. For now, as I said, you cannot unmute yourselves. Don't be alarmed. I will unmute you so that you can ask your questions to the panelists later. But first, I'm going to very quickly take you through something that I call techie checky. Just got to get it open here in the right spot. There we go. Just want to make sure that we are all in the same tech space together. So I'll go through some of this with you. So the first thing is, this is your Zoom window. I know that that seems basic, but the reason I bring it up is because sometimes as you're changing the size of your Zoom window, if it's smaller, you'll sometimes be missing certain tools. So if it seems like you're missing something, you can't find the chat function, something like that, just expand your window and the tool may appear on the bottom. So that's the first thing. Second thing I want to let you all know is that you do have closed captions available to you if you would like them. So if you go down on the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be a button that says CC Live Transcript, and you can turn on your subtitles that way if you need them. And you can, it's a live subtitling. It's about 80% accurate, so it's pretty good. The next thing is that we would like everyone to have your videos on if you are able to. In this Zoom world, it's really nice to be able to see people's facial expressions and body language when we're communicating with each other. And it's much more fun for our panelists if they can see you and interact with you. So please turn your video on if that's a possibility for you. Next is the chat function. All good, Elizabeth?
No, I just tried to turn my video on and I don't know what happened. Can you see me?
We can see you. Your video's on.
Okay, I can't see. Oh, that's right. You're screen sharing.
Yeah, it'll change probably in a moment.
Cool.
So we are asking that while the conversation is happening, if folks want to put their questions into the chat, I'm tracking them. And then when we move to the Q&A portion, we can unmute you so that you can ask your questions. We just want to have an idea of the questions that are coming in. So if you want to put them into the chat for us, that would be great. And that you can see on the screen there is where your chat button is. Speaker view and gallery view are the two ways to look at things on Zoom. I do recommend speaker view just because you'll be able to focus on who's speaking at that moment. We have all of our panelists spotlighted, so that's who will be prioritized on your screen. Gallery view can just get a little bit confusing and distracting. And then the other thing for kind of optimizing your view that I want to mention is hide non-video participants. So if you were in gallery view and you see a bunch of little gray boxes and you want to get rid of them, you'll just hover over one of them. You'll select the little button with the 3 dots in the corner, and then you can select hide non-video participants and all of those will go away. So that's all for my techie. And now I'm going to introduce our moderator, Andrea Pino-Silva. Andrea is a scholar and a strategist committed to bringing together grassroots organizing and radical storytelling to build intersectional and accessible social movements. Andrea is co-founder of the National Survivor Advocacy Organization End Rape on Campus, where she worked for over 5 years to support students in learning their rights under Title IX and in changing their campus sexual assault and harassment policies. She's the author of We Believe You, Survivors of Campus Sexual Assault Speak Out, and is a public scholar on issues of global gender-based violence, media framing of violence, gender and sexuality, and narratives of survivorhood. She's also a board member of the Outwards Archive. Take it away, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Lex, and thank you so much, Outwards, for having me here as moderator. I'm honored to be one of the board members of Outwards, among the youngest board members of Outwards, and I've had the privilege of being able to not just be on the board, but also be involved with our community programming. So I have the honor of introducing our panelists today before we kick off our panel, and I'll start with Dr. Charles Silverstein. So if you've seen the film, his face will definitely be familiar. He is a psychologist in private practice in New York City and one of the interviewees in CURED. He played a pivotal role in the battle to have homosexuality removed from the APA's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in 1973. He is also the author of many professional papers and 8 books, including The Joy of Gay Sex, which he co-authored with Edmund White. Patrick Sammon is a Washington, D.C. based filmmaker, is the co-producer and director of CURED. He previously served as a creator and executive producer of Codebreaker, an award-winning drama documentary, and the gay British codebreaker Alan Turing that reached more than 3 million viewers worldwide. Kylar Broadus is a lawyer, activist, public speaker, and writer. He founded the Trans People of Color Coalition, TPOCC, in 2010 to fill a gap in the private and nonprofit sectors. He was the first openly transgender person to testify before the US Senate, and his advocacy work has received awards in the National LGBTQ Task Force and the Freedom Center for Social Justice. Elizabeth Williams is one of John Waters' Dreamlanders with memorable roles in Pink Flamingos and Female Trouble. In 1972, she became one of the first women to participate in Johns Hopkins University's gender confirmation surgery program, the first American academic institution to offer the surgery. She has also been a facilitator of the Names Project AIDS Memorial Quilt, a national collection of quilt squares commemorating those who died from HIV and AIDS. This is our amazing panelists. So I'm just going to go back and say everyone's name, and I'll have them just say hello to make sure that we all know who is who. So I'll start with Patrick. You could just wave, Patrick.
Great to be with you.
Elizabeth.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled.
Dr. Silverstein.
Welcome to New York.
And Kylar.
Hello, nice to be with you.
All right, so I will start my first question for Patrick. How did this film come about, and why did you decide to make it?
Well, I appreciate the question, Andrea, and thank you for the introductions and for facilitating tonight's discussion. Thank you to the Outwards Archive and all the people on the team who helped make this event possible. It's been a lot of planning going into this, and really appreciate everyone tuning in, their interest in watching this film and learning about this story. And this is actually a momentous anniversary. Tonight is the 47th anniversary of the final announcement that the APA decision was affirmed. What happened is the board of directors in December of 1973 had voted on this change to the DSM to have homosexuality removed from it. And then there was actually a vote of the membership, unbelievably, which we can get into more later in the discussion. And tonight, this day, April 8th, 1974, is the anniversary of that final announcement that 58% of APA members. So something to mark that anniversary. This has been such a long journey to get this film made. My co-director, Bennett Singer, and I worked more than 5 years on it. It almost took us longer to make the film than it took the activists like Dr. Silverstein and to get the DSM changed. So it's been a great adventure to reach this point of sharing the film with people and really highlighting this important moment in our history. And I was familiar with this story, but a friend of mine in about 2014 had written a film treatment about the life of Frank Kameny, and as part of that treatment, there was a scene, the famous 1972 APA annual meeting where Dr. Anonymous, the man in the mask, testified what it was like to be a closeted gay psychiatrist. And that treatment sparked an idea in my mind. I had finished distribution efforts on my last film, and I was looking for another idea. And this really jumped out at me as an important story to tell and an inspiring story. And so from that point, I recruited my friend and now colleague, Bennett Singer, another filmmaker, to join me. And we started in early 2015, did our first interview in the spring of 2015. And the more we looked at this story, we realized how central it was to our history and the importance to tell this story and connect with people like Dr. Silverstein, who were at the heart of this story. And we were really excited about all the people we were able to capture their stories on camera. So hopefully we did justice to the amazing people who helped achieve this victory.
I mean, for me to watch the film, I watched it with my partner. It was definitely something that, just reminded me how far we've come, but also how difficult it is that we got to where we got. I think specifically also when we think about the LGBTQ movement, and that's why I think this film is so important, is I think that a lot of folks think that we went straight from Stonewall to litigation and here we are post Obergefell. And I think what's really powerful is that you do bring in someone like Dr. Silverstein, to show us what activism looks like. And activism isn't just being in the streets. It is one part of the story, but there's a lot of amazing work that oftentimes happens in our institutions that really can change lives. So I want to hear from you, Dr. Silverstein. Can you take us back to the moment in early 1973 when you addressed the APA's committee? And I'm really curious about, what led you here and how that moment felt.
It was a long road that led to that, and I won't go through all of it, but it starts at a convention of the AABT, the Association for the Advancement of Behavior Therapy, where activists, including me, decided to zap a presenter at the convention who was using aversion therapy, electrical aversion therapy, to try to cure homosexuals. And we took over that panel meeting, and in the audience was a psychiatrist by the name of Bob Spitzer, who was on the APA nomenclature committee. And because of him, we got an invitation to make a presentation before the committee to eliminate homosexuality. A committee was formed. I hesitate because I don't know how much to tell you. At the time, cooperating with psychiatrists was frowned upon because they were the oppressor. And so even though the committee came from the Gay Activist Alliance, they couldn't announce that it was from the Gay Activist Alliance. And so it was merely called the Ad Hoc Committee. And it consisted of both men and women who met for a number of weeks to talk about the strategy of how to present the material. A couple of our members presented a paper of all the research about homosexuality and was sent to the committee beforehand. And then there were two people who made presentations to the committee. I was asked to make the presentation from the professional point of view, and Jean O'Leary, a former nun, was asked to make the presentation about discrimination. And then each person on the committee was assigned a topic that if we tried to anticipate questions, and when we anticipated the question, it was a certain person on the committee who was assigned to answer that question. So that the point is that we were very well prepared. And we went there. The nomenclature committee didn't expect this. They expected we would come in like a bunch of howling idiots and break up the room and call everybody Nazis and horrible people. And what they got was a well-reasoned argument. And after the presentation, we were treated to lunch. People were very nice to us. And then afterwards, the politicking started.
Thank you so much for walking us through that. And I think what your comment about how they were expecting, I guess, a riot, for lack of a better way of saying it, I think it's really interesting. Because I think it's, and I think the film, Patrick, I think does a really good job of portraying precisely how the APA, ridiculed queer activists, like ridiculed the movement, and didn't necessarily expect that you all would come in with a scientific explanation for why homosexuality was not an illness. I think that was really powerful, and you coming in. So thank you for explaining that, Dr. Silverstein.
Yeah, but understand that there were times when it was appropriate to come in as a bunch of lunatics and break things up. When you're fighting in a social movement, you have to pick your strategy of what is appropriate at the time. And sometimes breaking up a meeting is the appropriate thing to do. And at other times, quiet pressure is appropriate. The problem is having the wisdom to knowing what strategy there is that's most appropriate for a certain situation.
I completely agree with you. And I think that's precisely what the film does a really good job of, is talking about what everyone's role was in the fight, and how our movements, there is a space for everyone, right? So I think that was a really powerful framing that you did in the film, Patrick, to quite literally talk about like all of the folks that were part of this fight, and how it was, how it was something that it took many different types of skill sets. And it took people with different, with varying levels of passion and different areas of investment in the fight. So I think that was what was really powerful. And it also, and I think again, that's one of the things that we see right now, where we are with the LGBTQ movement more broadly, is that, and it's why it's so important, why Outwards exists, to be able to tell these stories in a way that actually allow us to get at those different areas. So there's a lot of random text. So I was just like, what is happening? My screen is moving. So this is actually for both Dr. Silverstein and Patrick. So the film documents the arguments made against what Frank called the shabby, shoddy, sleazy pseudoscience that underpinned the mental illness classification for homosexuality. But there was also this political component, like I was saying earlier, like the different parts that made this movement successful. In your view, was the DSM fight about science or politics, or both? And was it always that way? And can you talk about the interplay between science and politics that was part of the fight from your viewpoint?
Charles, what
do you have about 2 days for me to talk about this? It's all politics. Science is tangential. It has always been about politics. And today, when it comes to talking about diagnoses, it's about politics. That the APA, like any professional organization, is composed of a number of different groups that have theoretical interests and especially economic interests. And it's always a battle, and it's about getting the votes. It's only a political issue.
But Charles, let me ask you this. You sort of had to meet the nomenclature committee, though, on scientific grounds. So you sort of were thinking of it in a political structure, but the people within the APA very much considered it a scientific consideration, correct?
Well, not exactly. For instance, you talked about the vote afterwards. It was a vote that was sponsored by Socarides and a bunch of psychoanalysts of the day. And they raised the petition that they got enough votes. But there was a letter sent out to the membership about whether they want to support the decision of the board of directors. The letter was not written by the organization, APA. It was written by gay activists. And it was a cleverly written letter. I had no part of it, but it was clever. It wasn't a letter that asked the membership, do you think homosexuality should be in the nomenclature? That they knew that would be a deadly vote. What they did is slant a letter to, should you support the decision of the board of directors? And if you don't, that it would be embarrassing to the organization. And so under that basis, they got to 58%, as you said. But it was, I mean, it was a political letter. It's all political, and I should say economic. When we fought against the presence of homosexuality on the nomenclature, we had in mind the pocketbooks of the psychiatrists who were making money off gay people. And we wanted to hurt their pocketbook. It was a very conscious intention of ours to interfere with their income. And then all over the country, there were groups of people who formed peer counseling centers composed of gays and lesbians to help gays and lesbians in their local cities. I mean, places like Seattle, Boston, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, New York, they all came in the next couple of years. Finished.
Thank you for sharing all that. And I think it's interesting, because back to your comment about it's all political. I think a lot about where we are right now with trans rights and the pseudoscience that's being thrown out in the news consistently, and that a lot of people are not really taking the time to actually see it for what it is. And a lot of the arguments that I was hearing in the film sounded very recent to me. I felt like I had been seeing them in Twitter or Facebook, or I had been hearing them in the news. And it's the same pattern that's being weaponized politically right now against transgender people. So I want to hear from both Elizabeth and Kylar what your reactions were to the film, and kind of your own story. Did you see anything about the film that reminded you of just where you were in your story, or just what your reactions were in general?
Sure. Who first? How about Kylar?
Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I did indeed see quite a few parallels in the film, because when I went first to Johns Hopkins University, the prestigious university hospital, I expected an extraordinarily welcoming, organized program. And it wasn't remotely what I thought it would be. This was obviously before everything that happened in the film happened, but there was a very unusual construct with regard to the way that they objectified people who were gender nonconforming. And it was almost, unbeknownst to me, very much like coming into an audition. And it became very clear very early on that they were interested in making quote unquote appropriate women. And they expected, a few examples are that a person could not be married. If a person was M to F, they could not identify as a lesbian. And basically they wanted to make Donna Reed and Sandra Dee. And I completely did not fit their mold. Not even a little bit. I had just gotten back from Woodstock. I was in a little blue jean miniskirt with a tank top and my hair up in pigtails. And I said, "Hi, I'm here." And they said, no, this really isn't going to work. And I realized very early on that they weren't being judgmental about my gender. They were being judgmental about what they perceived as the type of person I was. So I immediately informed them that I thought that was relatively bizarre and that their priorities were all wrong. But because they were under so much scrutiny for having the program, that they were behaving in a way that was harmful to the participants. I was not allowed to meet any other transgender people ever. There were no groups. There were psychiatrist after psychiatrist, and they made it very clear that if I made it through, which was very iffy, and I said, but wait, why am I not going to, I'm already a girl. What do you want? And they said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And that went on until we all got bored. And then they made it very clear that the goal was to have what we call gender confirmation surgery today, and then to disappear and assimilate into society, to which I immediately said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue to be me. I didn't come here for a psychiatrist. I came here for a plumber. Are you going to help me or not? And I saw a lot of parallels in the film, because even though it wasn't spoken of at Johns Hopkins in a political fashion, they were politicizing my being. They were judging me on things other than my gender. They were judging me on my humanity. And that touched me very deeply when I watched the film, because it was that question of, we were the people who were disenfranchised, and then we found ourselves in a position where we were having to educate the people who were purportedly in charge of us, the gatekeepers.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I wanted Elizabeth to go first intentionally, and that's great, because I come just a little bit after Elizabeth, and she went by the Harry Benjamin standards of the blend in and conform. And the stereotypical story was not much different after I came along. And I walked in minus the beard, but looking just the same as I do today, sounding just the same as I do today. And they wanted me to fit this pattern. And I said, I'm not going through any 2-year program to be what the psychiatrist wanted me to be. Right. I said, I am me. So there are many parallels of what they considered to be what they thought was appropriate, but they were all binary people who decided these things. And then there was a hidden trans person on the staff who they wouldn't disclose. And I thought this was all ridiculous. And I said to them, I'm not going through any 2-year program. I'm me. I've been me. And this is ridiculous. I said, look at me. Hello. Welcome to my world. I cannot use a public facility. And I'm not doing this. So you're going to have to meet me halfway. And they had been used to doing this to marginalize people who were willing just to fall in line. And I wasn't willing to fall in line because I knew who I was. Just as Elizabeth, pleasure to meet you, knew who she was. And I said, I knew who I know who I am. And so I fought them all the way, because this is no mental disease or defect. I am a human being. And there are many parallels to this, as also I helped fight the APA with many of my colleagues. A couple are on in the audience here. And then there were a few, because I come along in the next generation after Elizabeth, and we say, no, we're not disappearing into the ethos. We are being visible. We are being proud. And by the way, APA, you have this all wrong. And so we fought them tooth and nail continuously to remove their language that said we were mentally ill. It's like, we're not mentally ill. You are wrong. And so we fought them and fought them, because I've been in this movement for 35 years. And
Sure.
it's like, we fought them and fought them and fought them. And it's like, this language is not acceptable. No, it's not. And heads to Dr. Silverman, I wasn't a doctor, but I learned to read medical everything. And people think I did not think I'm a doctor when I walk in places. I just got that the other day. It's like, I'm not an idiot and I can read. And it's like, no. And so I made them, because at that time in the North America, there were only 3 gender clinics: Johns Hopkins, University of Minnesota, and in Canada. And so I flew back and forth to the University of Minnesota and said, this will not be a 2-year program. No, this will be the program. And I'm going to go through your little steps and your psychological tests. And we're going to wrap this up and get me on out of here. And you're going to give me the letters that I need. Why do I need a gatekeeper to tell me who I am? Do other people need a gatekeeper? Why are you my gatekeepers when you know nothing about me or who the people, our people are, or the way we've lived? Who are you to tell me who my people and me are? So the parallels are so great, except they continue to call us crazy and continue to want to put that language until we fought them and continue to fight them. And we didn't have any doctors on our side at that time as trans people, but we had enough knowledge that we would not back down. And I go to, and I will yield, because I'll continue to talk forever too, like Dr. Silverman, because I've been a professor and a lawyer forever. And it's like, show me, because you got to show me the money. I'm originally from the show me state. And it's like, no, we will not. We are not crazy. We're human beings, and we deserve to be on this planet. And we've been on this planet forever, just like any other people. So stop these special. And so we help remove the gatekeepers. And we said, no more gatekeepers. You don't make decisions for us. You don't make decisions for the people to determine their genders. And it's like, so why are you making that when we know who we are? So no, we're not going to allow this. And so we fought tooth and nail ad nauseum, the few of us. And then I want to go to what the one point, and I will yield, that Dr. Silverstein made. We were strategic. We knew when to be, polite and nice and whatever. And it was the same group of us. It wasn't a different group of us. And then we knew when to unleash. I'm a great protester. People think now because they see me, oh no, I'll grab a protest sign in a minute and disrupt your place. It's like, we did not stand down until we got them to do what we wanted them to do. And then we got the American Medical Association on board at first, before we got the APA on board. And I've always used that. Don't give me what I want. And it wasn't just me. I never credit it's just me. We went around them to get through to what we wanted. And I know Elizabeth wanted to say more, but I wanted to put those pieces in.
I would just, it's such a pleasure to hear every word you're saying. It's heartening to me. But something that I'd just like to follow that up with is I heard every time you said the word we, and in 1972, when I was going to Johns Hopkins, there was no we. I was alone. They would not even allow me to meet one other trans person ever. And that was their way of separating us, thinking that they could keep the upper hand. And I finally got to the point where I said, either we're going to do this sensibly, or I'm going to quit. And they said, you can't quit. And I said, well, you can't stop me. Yes, I can quit. And finally, one of the doctors said, why don't you just wake up and look at her? She's already successfully assimilated into society. She is all, whether you like her or not is not the issue. The issue is that she's obviously successfully already existing, and she's asking for help, and you're saying no based on your own personal biases. And that's the only thing that got me through. But yes, there was no we until many years later. But once there was a we, I hopped right on board. And I'm so proud of everything you said. Thank you.
Well, and Elizabeth, I want to say that we was less than 5 people. So
Bless your heart.
There was the 3, then the 4, and then the 5 of us. And the 5 of us did a lot of work for a long time to bring, and then there were more of us. So just wanted to make that point. That there were a few of us, a handful of us, and again, not mad about it, but there was no collective big group doing a lot. Giving nod to my peers in the audience that I know were there doing some of the battle. But there was a few of us doing the handful, just to make sure people know it wasn't a massive crowd like the folks we have today out there doing work. So
absolutely. But I have to applaud you for so long ago doing what you had to do, even if there were 5 of you, even if there was 1 of me, because today we are still each in our own way reaching our hand down so those beautiful children that are coming after us, our siblings that I know you love as much as I do, don't have to go through quite as much as we did, even though they still have a tough row to hoe. And I feel
make a comment here.
Sure.
Something that's being left out. One of probably the most important emotion that gay people felt in those days and transgender people in those days was shame. And shame is a very destructive emotion. Gay people couldn't get together because of a sense of shame. And while I have no idea what happened at Johns Hopkins, it may be that there were very few other people who were there for transitioning who would not meet another trans person because of the sense of shame. It's an incredibly destructive emotion. And I'm not excusing Johns Hopkins. I know some of the things that happened there, but I can remember a number of gay people who refused to meet with other gay people.
Yes.
For that reason.
But thank you. But for a clarification, at the end of the day, one of the issues that was paramount for them when I would go to psychiatrist after psychiatrist, they would say, "What's troubling you?" And I would say, "Nothing. I'm fine." And they were actually concerned about the fact that I was not ashamed. But with regard to not meeting other trans people, in 1972 at Johns Hopkins, that was actually a rule. When I finally had my surgery, I had my surgery on the maternity floor with strict instructions to not tell anyone why I was in the hospital. But with all of that said, I do have to say that at the end of the day, difficult as it was, they helped me. They were very good to me ultimately, and I could not have received better care. But boy, was it a tough pull to get it, but I'm a tough broad and I did. But thank you for that input, because that really, that shame thing is like, it's so odd that they were worried because I wasn't ashamed. Almost like they wanted my life to be a tragedy. And I was like, my life was a comedy. But thank you.
And I have to, Dr. Silverstein, agree with you. I had so many transgender people come out to meet me because they had been on disability in their homes, afraid to come out. And it gives me it brings me to tears almost now to relate those stories, because I refuse to be invisible, because I was raised by two people from the civil rights movement that were oppressed as people themselves. They were children of slaves, and they taught me to be proud and to stand tall no matter who I am. And I never have been in the closet. And when the news cameras followed me all around, because it was an anomaly to be an out trans person, even in my time after Elizabeth. And people would call me and come visit, and I never forget that. And they were ashamed. And I would say, it's okay to be yourself. And they said, I have not been out of my house in 10, 20 years because I was ashamed and I am trans. And it's
Yes.
it's okay, be you, be proud. And it amazed me. And I was glad to be that conduit. And I know that that's part of my purpose. And it's not about me. It's not about me. It's just part of my purpose here. And I'm doing a purpose. So Dr. Silverstein, thank you, because it's so true.
You all have actually answered like 7 of my questions. So it's really funny that it's all passed really well. I did want to go back really quickly, Elizabeth, what you said about assimilating. So my partner and I talk a lot about this and where we are in the LGBTQ movement and what it means to remind youth about what it meant to come out and what it meant to stay visible. And I say this because I'm a youth leader at my church, and I would say half of the youth identify as some variation of queer, gender queer, and it's something that they talk about constantly, right? They constantly talk about being queer, and to me it's so beautiful because I don't want my partner and I to just have a heterosexual unit. Like, that's not what I want. I don't want equality. I want to live in queerness, because queerness makes me a better person, a better advocate, a better activist. And it's because of my queerness that I have been able to do the work that I do. And I will say also too, Kylar, what you were saying about being visible and what it meant to have a unit, right? And Elizabeth, you were saying this too, like sometimes I think that our institutions keep us apart on purpose. And I say sometimes, I mean, I'm pretty clear about this, right? Regardless whatever oppression we experience, I'm a survivor of sexual violence. It's incredible how our spaces, our institutions will keep people apart, because when we're together, we are powerful, right? And that is something that I think is across movements. We see this over and over and over again, that when we have a network of people, we are powerful, right? Whether it's elections, whether it's somehow disrupting a system that has continued, to embolden police to take Black lives. I mean, these are not new issues, right? But what makes us unstoppable is coming together and staying visible, right? And continuing to share our stories. And that is what I think to me was so inspiring, and just to continue to hear you all talk about it, because it's precisely, now, like what, and I think even the process of transitioning, right? Like what it means to transition and to be told that when you transition, it's over, right? You're a man, you're a woman, but you've always been a man, you've always been a woman, right? Like you were saying, Elizabeth, like you came in for a plumber. I love that quote, right? But it's amazing how even the rhetoric right now, like the media loves to focus on becoming a woman, becoming a man, and not on like what it literally just means to be seen as human. And Kylar, you had already mentioned, is I was going to ask you about the intersection of race specifically, because you were saying, Elizabeth, about John Hopkins wanting to build an ideal woman. And I see so much of the rhetoric even now in this idea of transition being very white supremacist in nature, like what white supremacy sees as the ideal woman and the ideal man, even among white people, right? It's having certain types of features. It's looking a certain way so you're able to pass. And then Janet Mock talks a lot about this and what it was like for her to transition really early, and how as a Black woman, like she never really had to deal with a lot of this, like, you know, emasculating features because she had the privilege of transitioning early. But she says, and it's like, that's the thing, is that like people see me as digestible. Like I don't have to, I come out as trans because I want to, because I want people to know that I am a trans woman, not just because I am digestible to what society sees as a woman. So I think it's really powerful the way that you all talk about this. But yeah, again, you had already answered my questions, but I did want to like, the reason I wanted to ask them is I think specifically what you were saying about like what society sees as human, I think is incredibly powerful in this discourse, because like Dr. Silverstein was saying, like the use of political science, you know, politicized science to justify who is human and who is not. I mean, this has been going on for so long and it continues happening. I know you want to say something, Elizabeth. I have one more question for everybody about where we are right now, but did you want to say something, Elizabeth?
I did. I think what you say is so very, very important, because the concept of visibility, even in our community, can be a bit misconstrued. I can never forget, never, just how alone I was. But yes, there I was in Baltimore, and I met my dear friend to this day, John Waters, and I became a cinema anarchist, and I became both sanctified and vilified for being so unapologetically crude, if you will, but it was for a very, very important reason. If anyone goes back and watches that film, it's about the fact that I got to win. It's a small scene, it's a joke, but where people of trans experience are usually the brunt of the joke, I got to make the joke. And the beauty is that I got to own that joke to this very day. And because of that, I realized the importance of visibility. And even though sometimes even in the community, because I've been lucky enough to do things with Outwards, things with the I'm from Driftwood Project, be in several books, what have you. It's because of that visibility, because I don't know that kid in Wyoming who doesn't have anyone. And if they just see me speaking with a smile and saying, no, life is not a tragedy, everything can be okay, that makes it worth it. And if that makes me a media whore, then I will also wear that badge proudly, because I like nothing more than accessing people who are coming after me and just smiling and saying, it's good. Being happy is your birthright. You don't have to earn it. That's all.
And moderator, if I may, what I'd like to say to youth is, because I look this form doesn't mean I'm not revolutionary. I'm revolutionary. When I say I'm a gender outlaw, some young person said to me, I hope not. And they were trans. And I'm like, you haven't done your homework, because you, one, need to know what that book is, but two, you need to know that I was a gender outlaw, that we were not conformist. And now you think I'm a conformist, and that trans men of my era have lived non-binary lives, and they don't know that. So they just box us and say, oh, you're just a man. And it's like, I've always been a man inside and internally, but we live non-binary lives. So non-binary is not new. And I hear a lot of people that don't understand that. And thank you, Elizabeth, for laughing, and because you know. And I've done a panel with John Waters, by the way. And I just had to let you know. But people need to, that's why I always told my students, you got to know your past to know where you're going. And many people don't want to know that. And so for people that don't have that curve as we have in the movement, and that's great because that's why we do this work, it's important for them to know that and just not want to know about older activists or somebody that looks older, because then there's the assumption that we're not queer. And it's like, I embrace queerness. I embrace differentness because I've always been different. Even within my race, I've been different because in the 60s, you know, I was not Black enough and I was gender non-conforming. So to be non-conforming of anything in the 1960s was definitely, and I don't want to use picnic because that's not a Black thing to say, but it was definitely not a holiday. And so for them to not understand that and then want to say we're conformists, because I was on a panel and they go, wow, Kylar Broadus calls somebody out. Kylar Broadus has been calling people out for 35 years. And so it's important that we know our history, like Dr. Silverstein and all these things, which is why I'm with Outwards, and the movie Cured is important because we got to know the shoulders we stand on. I stand on and I've been a part of the gay movement, every letter in the gay movement too. And I've been there too. When I give my speeches, when gay people don't stand with us and I talk about all the places that I have been, then they're like, whoa, yeah, Kylar Broadus has been busy. And so have many other trans activists. So we can't assume by looking at a person, the box they're in, where they have been and what they have done. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
I can just listen to you all forever. I have one more question, and then we're going to open up to everyone else. So where we are right now, you know, years after what happened in Cured, you know, there's still many efforts to try to cure queer people and changing our orientations or gender identities. Do you see a difference in where we are in the fight against conversion therapy than where things were before? And if so, like what are any of you involved in the fight to end conversion therapy? And what do you see as being successful in that fight?
Well, I think that most states today have made illegal the attempt to change sexual orientation by licensed professionals in anyone under the age of 18. And that's a great advance. Now, there are still places where people are trying to convert people, but they're almost always done by religious groups, where you're told if you come to Jesus, you'll be able to be forgiven and change your sexual orientation. But I don't think there's any question that gays are in a much better place today than we've ever been before. Now, that doesn't mean the battle is completely won, but certainly it's much better. I mean, we have gay professors, gay open politicians. It's certainly true that the advances come in the large cities at first, and then sweep into the Middle, West, and South, and slowly, but they get there.
Well, I just want to say for trans people, the bills have been knocked down, but there's a different kind. There's a backwards trans conversion therapy going on, and it's sweeping this country like a wildfire right now. And there's an attack on our children, and it's not called conversion therapy, but it's what's happening. And so the bills that hit the state houses, because President Biden is not for this, and neither is Vice President Harris. But what has happened is the religious folks are in the state houses. There have been over 80 bills introduced in state houses across the country, and they're continuing to introduce bills that ban children from sports, which is against, of course, the AMA, the APA, and the Endocrine Association. And these bills not only ban them from sports and Arkansas was the latest one that even went to through college to ban college people, and then they're penalizing professionals and even coaches to criminalize it if they engage or allow students that are trans to engage in these activities. And not only that, they're also now introducing bills that ban medical treatment for children. So while the conversion therapy bills were knocked down, they're coming backwards at it and doing it now. So these bills are hot and heavy. I have been on it and working with colleague organizations that are much bigger than mine, but that's what I spend every moment doing on Twitter and on social media and everywhere, asking people to write their state legislatures and governors, across the United States, in every state you can think of except California, to write them and let them know this is not okay and it's not approved by any medical authorities, and the negative impact it will have on our trans children and the 70% suicide rate that it will contribute to in our trans children. Because our trans children tell us why they kill themselves is because they just have no solution, and they don't come to their parents and they don't go to anyone else. And so this is huge, and it's happening right now. And we need everybody on board to fight these bills and to do this now, or we're going to lose a bunch of children real quickly that have been entitled, have had these, not entitled, but have had these rights. Because I knew who I was at 2, and I can tell you the memories I had. And so, and I didn't get to enjoy my childhood. And it's wonderful. I finally got to be at a conference with trans children. I finally got to speak at it. I've been trying to get there for years. And when I was recovering 2 years ago from my illness, I finally got to get there, and I could barely talk because I almost went away and wasn't coming back. But it was a pleasure to be there and give a speech and talk to them and the parents, and to see them frolic and play and be themselves. And now we have people that are just being hateful because of the spite of the 45's administration, and now the seeds that have been planted and the attack on our children. So we need everybody putting oars in the water and fighting these bans across this country.
That is absolutely true, because as I see it right now, and I find it to be perhaps the most egregious treatment of all, is for our young siblings, their version of conversion therapy is to refuse medical care. And that does irreparable harm, not only to us, but to our entire society, because they are destroying people in the name of their own self-righteous bigotry.
This has been really. Oh, Charles, you go.
Go ahead. Go, Patrick.
No, I was just saying how humbling and inspiring this discussion is, listening to all of you talk about these experiences and the fight that still has to be done. And I think hopefully this film can be a bit of an inspiration to the present day work that still obviously needs to be done. And one sort of sign of at least the progress we made is that the APA, as the film talks about, is today led by an openly gay psychiatrist. So instead of the APA being our opponents, they're now our allies in confronting these terrible bills that are happening all around the country. And that's been at least a positive sign that we have allies on our side.
Andrea, can we open it up to people who want to make comments or ask questions?
I wasn't sure if you were going to say something else, Charles, which is why I let you wait. Yes, Lex, do you want to take over for the Q&A?
Yeah, so I know that everybody gets a little bit anxious on Zoom, but we do have our brilliant panelists here ready to answer questions. So if you want to raise your hand physically, I have a screen over here. I can see all of you, or you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom and I will unmute you so that you can ask your questions. Are we seeing anybody? Claudia, I see you. Go ahead, Claudia.
I'd like to make a comment. And my comment was to Andrea when she said that we had to conform to a certain look. The time of my transition in 1974, you do have to conform in a certain look because you didn't want to look manly after you became a woman, and you needed to go and have augmentations and facial reconstructions and stuff like that so you could look as feminine as possible, so you wouldn't feel shamed by the people looking at you and saying, oh, what an ugly man in a dress. Or when they say, oh, look at that beautiful girl. It was the whole part of being a trans at the time. Today, I really don't care what I look like. But at the time, you had to conform to a certain look to pass from being a trans into the cis world. That's all I had to say.
There's a comment about the DSM and gender dysphoria. And let me explain what happened there. When the committee was working on the sexual disorders section of DSM for DSM-5, a number of the committee members wanted to remove identity disorder completely. But a political compromise was made because they wanted to be able to allow trans people to use insurance in order to get treatment, including top and bottom surgery. And so they thought there had to be something, but instead of calling it a disorder, they called it gender dysphoria. So it wouldn't sound like a disorder, but it would allow transgender people to use insurance. And that's why that compromise was made. It wasn't an attempt to pathologize people who are trans.
And yeah, I was part of that, and we understood that, and that was, yeah, part of the compromise.
So I see Kendall has a question. Kendall, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead, Kendall.
Hi, how are you doing? So thank you for having me. I am a big believer in cross-cultural intersectionality. I believe in allyship, and I believe in creating allyship with those who may not have any experience with the transgender population. This is how we, are able to tell truthful narratives that are positive and healthy. But I wonder just how can us as trans individuals, and I am trans, create and carve out spaces where healing dialogue can happen with cisgender communities that, may not know anything about the transgender experience, or even maybe hostile to the transgender experience, perhaps due to some breakdown in communication barriers that exist. How would you go about addressing that?
I'll jump in if no one else will. I don't mean to hog space, but I do it a lot because I've done all sorts of trans work, but I created Trans POC in 2010, because at that time there were no groups of color doing any work. And after I created, there were tons, because I didn't really want another project to create. And I waited and waited for somebody else to dive in the waters. And the concept of the group is that we work within our cultures to make cultures understand that honestly, we've been in those cultures forever. And some of the wording we use are European words, because as a Black person, I know that we had all these people in our communities, and that in our churches, because I remember getting in trouble one time, you could not talk about Sister Sally and Sister Sue in the community, because we had our Black communities too, or the trans people, because we had trans ministers and trans people. You respected those people in our cultures, and there are very many POC, BIPOC cultures that we've always had these people in. It's when the European terms came along, and I think there's some changes and shifts with that people didn't feel connected to those terms or identities. So I go in Black Baptist churches all the time, and I bring up these concepts. And I used to think I was going to get killed. But you know what I found is that when you talk honestly and with candor to people, people understand, and there's embracing in these communities. And so that led me to create that group. Sadly, people only think because I'm a Black leader that it's just about Black people, but it's about BIPOC people, because of our different cultures and our commonalities actually in cultures as BIPOC people, because we do have commonalities. And so we work within those cultures to then also cross over into the LGBT movement and do work within it to educate them about BIPOC communities, because there's also the overlay of just what we see as happening in the regular world that the LGBT community mainstream really does not get, because we see it in the main world. And so we have to educate them about BIPOC communities. And so intersectionality is huge, because I was on a panel the other day where some leader said it wasn't. And it's like they are a major leader of a major group. And there is this huge misunderstanding about intersectionality and what that is. And honestly, if we understood it, we would have a lot less problems. And so that is the work we do. It's difficult. It's not as difficult as people think if we wake up and learn about other people's cultures. And it's honestly not as difficult, because when I came out, trans was not popular, and people embraced me because I had many battles, and the allies came on board to support me, because judges didn't want to talk to me, and I had to fight to keep my bar license just because I was Black and trans. And there were allies that came out of the woodwork and face of all that came to support me. And so you'll be amazed at the conversations. They start slowly and gradually, and I'll be quiet here now. BIPOC means Black, Indigenous, people of color is what BIPOC means. So for everyone. And so that is my short story on that. But it can happen. You just have to be brave. And, I'm willing to talk to you aside. You can find me anywhere. Just Google, and you'll find somewhere a number to reach me at. You can contact any national organization, and they'll connect me to you. And we can talk more about it on side, sister. And we'll get you connected to doing more of intersectionality and talking to people and communities, and stop the hate, because it's about stopping the hate.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just loved everything he said. And just for a little background, I feel compelled to say, Ms. Kendall Stevens happens to be, I'm lucky enough that she happens to be my co-facilitator at our gender group here in Philadelphia. And everything that Kendall spoke about, she is indeed a living example of teaching and leading by example. So I'm just glad to see that what's happening this evening is that because of the film, we are coming together, and I have the opportunity to see my sister, my brilliant young friend, ask such an amazing question of such an astute man to answer it. Thanks, sister. Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm gonna unmute Lucia next. Lucia, you had a question?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to get my video on. First, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for sharing this space with us and sharing your stories and your wisdom. And I guess I'm just really curious to know what your visions of queer liberation will look like, or what they do look like. And yeah, so what will liberation look like for the queer community?
Was the question, what will liberation look like in the future? Is that what you're asking?
I guess I'm asking, what will it look like? What does it look like? What do you envision it as? What do you imagine liberation looking like?
I have no idea. If I was that good, I'd play the stock market.
But you worked to bring liberation. Your work
Yes, yes, I know about the past, and I think I know how we got here. I have a fair idea of what's going on. But you know, every generation brings its own ideology. And the ideology of today is very different than it was when I was active in the gay liberation movement. And I would never have predicted it. Just as one example, we did not argue in those days for marriage for gays and lesbian people. It was not only inconceivable, but we were against it. And of course, now people are getting married. So what will happen in the next generation, you know, the kids who are in elementary school these days? And I'm not very good at predicting these things. Don't know. It's a fair question, but I can't answer it.
Kylar always has something to say. You know, I can't predict the future either, but things I do see coming is it definitely will be more brown and black. It definitely is more diverse. And what I've seen is we had a gay movement, we have a trans movement, and we have a queer movement. And that's what people don't seem to get now. And as we've transitioned, we lose that. Because I can talk to people that were in the gay movement and the moments were different. And I can talk to people in the queer movement and they're different. And then people don't realize, because the trans movement has been sort of consumed, that honestly by the LGBT people or the LG people, and they sort of don't want to own that, because we had a trans movement and we still have a trans movement and competent trans leaders. And so that's sort of now back into contention, thank goodness, because trans people should lead their own movement. Any marginalized group should lead their own movement. And so I'm always that person on the panel that speaks that. And now, thank goodness, other people are speaking that, because they were afraid to speak that. I'm never afraid to speak anything, because I didn't even think I'd make it this far. I thought I'd already be killed by someone. So every day is a bonus day to me. And I'm like Elizabeth. People are like, why are you so happy? I'm like, hey, this is a good day. I'm still here. So I do see distinct changes and differences, and those are just some that I see and things that I won't know, because in the trans movement, we never thought we would see these many wins or gains in our lifetime for my group that I started out with, when there were just a few of us. And we never thought there'd be these many wins or we'd make it this far. Because literally I thought somebody would knock me off. I knew when I took these steps that someone would have killed me by 32. And I am happy to say that I'm well above that, even though I like to say I'm only 35 and Holden, or 39 like Jack Benny, who you have no idea who he is or was, but I do. So, but I'm always been a trend setter, and I always like to say I'm a Cher or a Tina Turner, people that have always turned with the time. And that's why I'm a strategist in the movement. I wear many hats because I'm able to see and be a predictor of things in the immediate coming. But definitely brown and black, more diversity and intersectionality, as Ms. Kendall said. And those are some obvious things that I definitely see coming. We're not going to have this white-led movement because you just see the tide and the times changing. And so I see more diversity and leadership changes as we see these structural and systemic changes, because I don't just live in the gay or the queer world or the trans world. Kylar lives in the world, you know, and so those are some of the things I see.
Tyler, thank you. And if I can just mirror on that for a second, I think what is so beautiful is that, yes, we were there a long time ago, but we still embrace relevance today. But in that relevance, we recognize, like Kendall, the young firebrands that are coming up, that I feel that it's a privilege and a responsibility to encourage them. But sometimes when they say, what is it going to look like? I like to mirror it back to them and say, well, now that you are helping to carry the torch, what is it going to look like? Part of it's up to you, because you are the future.
Here, sister.
Yeah. And it's a joy.
I think that social change is often a reaction, often a rebellion against what came before. My own view is that it was the election of Obama that brought on Trump and Trumpian politics. So now we have Biden, who I think is a rebellion against Trump. So now what will happen after Biden? I don't know, but I think that will control a great deal of how LGBTQ and trans people are treated 5 years from now.
Agreed.
Thank you all so much for that. I want to give Abra a chance to ask a question. Go ahead, Abra.
Hi, my name is Abra, and thank you all for all of the amazing work that you've done over the decades. It's really cool to meet you all. I'm a mental health counselor, and I've been practicing for 11 years. And when I was in grad school, you know, we were talking about all the change. When I was in grad school in 2010, we had a debate in our class about whether we would provide conversion therapy or not if someone asked for it. That's where we were. So, and I am a bi and trans person, so you can imagine how I felt about that conversation. I was the only person who was really like, this is never okay. Everyone, well, maybe, no. So that was that. You know, and I've been fighting ever since. And I think what I want to ask is, like, this work is hard on so many, the advocacy as well as like activism, as well as my own personal work and growing as a human and trying to figure out my place in the world and And then on top of all of that, being a clinician and working within and living in capitalism. Oh my gosh. Yes. So I guess my question is, knowing that you've all, especially like Elizabeth and Kylar, just straight up saying you're happy every day and like you're in that place. I mean, I'm 35 and I feel so much more jaded than you. Help. How do you maintain joy, and how do you keep fighting the good fight and, get up every day and keep doing that work? Because it's hard.
Well, if you want me to go, firstly, thank you. And if you think you're more jaded than me, you don't know much about me, dear. But
you put up a good front.
Thank you. I think for me, just like the beautiful young woman who spoke, my sister Kendall, what is different today is that there is not just strength in numbers, but that there is intuition, there's collaboration, there is hopefully more intersectionality, and there are more people at the table. And in that strength, I find strength. No, every day is not a holiday. If I portrayed that, that's not accurate. But it's in the fact that there are so many brilliant and extraordinarily energetic people doing the work that buoys me to at least stay in the game and to share what I may have to share and to listen as much as I speak, to listen to what people who are coming up are saying, because it's critical. And maybe, I'm sure Kylar would have some wise words to add.
Well, you pretty much said it all, sister, honestly.
We're going now.
No, the only thing I'm going to add is you, Abra, make me stay. It is what Elizabeth said. You and Abra and all the other folks make me stay in the game. You give me energy.
Yep.
I do this work for other people. If I come and every day is not a happy day, or I don't just jump out of bed, one, because I've worn out my body doing activism. I have an 80-year-old body, literally. It just doesn't appear that way. But spend the day and you'll see. But because I've done too many 24-hour turnaround on airplanes, traveling from coast to coast or whatever, and then not sleeping, hitting the ground, go give a speech and do all those sorts of crazy things, because it is the activism that fills me. But also, I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors as a Black person and as a trans person. And that's what empowers me, the youth and my ancestors. And that's what makes me joyful, and when I do this, and that's what empowers me, because I know you are able to be you, and you can have a better life than I had. And that's what empowers me. And it is like Elizabeth said, usually I'm talking a lot now, but I throw it to the youth. I make it about you. It's the empowerment. And it's like, yes, this is about you and making a way so that a way is better. And it's not only the trans youth, it's the Black youth, it's the white youth, it's the everybody youth. So this is a better world. And if I can do that, then I've done my job. And if I know what my parents went through and what they lived through, even though they edited a lot, because I was a late child of older folks, and they went through a whole lot more than I've ever gone through. And I remember that in my head. And I know that if they went through what they went through, I can do this. I got this. I got it like nothing. So I stand up every day and do my part. And if you ever hear me give a speech, my parents are always in there. I can write a speech and I'll never give that speech, because when I stand up in front of you, they come in and they feel my soul. And you will get a speech that is burning and rebel rousing, because they were my lions in a time where there were no lions and people didn't know, especially in a community where I was from, that it was okay to be me. But they protected me because they were my lions. And so I can be your lion. That's what I'm saying. I can be your lion. And so that's what gives me the fire to burn and to be happy, because there are tough times, but I can share with you the curves and give you the phone call when you're feeling transphobic. And I tell you, go to the mall or airport. And when you get done looking there, you'll see that everybody looks trans, because they do. Okay. And so, oh, they all look trans. And so then you'll have a better day, because I know those tips and curves. But, you know, I do have privilege, honestly, because I came out looking just like my father always. And so I know I have that privilege also, except now my face has been everywhere for 35 years. And so I don't have that privilege, because I prefer to be out for you, to give you that strength that you need, because you're going to be okay, because you're going to make it. And I can tell, because I'm taking extra long with you, because I want you to feel the fire from Elizabeth and I, because you are going to be okay. And this, Abra, is what makes my day, because I want to make it okay for you and everybody else. Okay.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you, Abra, for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
So I do want to jump to our call to action, but before I do that, I think Kendall wanted to say one last thing. So go ahead, Kendall.
Yes, I wanted to really thank everyone, all the panelists, for inspiring me in some kind of way. I wasn't going to mention this, but when I spoke in front of the Senate Majority Policy Committee, the first thing I did was I went to Kylar's testimony that he gave in front of the Senate when he spoke in support of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. I wanted to get some inspiration. I wanted to see how he moved and how he conducted himself, which was absolutely stellar. It was a stellar sight to see and experience, and it emboldened me and really kind of helped me get over my anxiety. So I want to thank you for that. And also I want to thank everyone here for letting all of us know that there are different ways to advocate. You know, I'm really big on protests, policy, politics, and I believe in the tenets of those constructs. I believe in the nature of how they interrelate and interplay, because it's very important that, you know, as advocates, we do find our lane, however that is. Now, it seems with me, I have done it all. Macro work, meso work, and some micro, but I just want to thank you so much, all of you, for, you know, being the kind of the change agents that you are, and inspiring and motivating people like me to put ourselves out there to affect change on a massive level. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kendall. We do have one more person who wants to ask something. So go ahead, Tony.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet you all. I saw the film last night, and, you know, it was quite shocking, really. And I enjoyed it, though. And I really just wanted to sort of say thank you to, especially to, like, you know, everyone who's come before me, Elizabeth, Kylar, Claudia. It was very interesting. I've heard you speak about your experience at Johns Hopkins before, Elizabeth, and it was very interesting to hear Kylar speak about his experience. And I went through, I'm in Australia, and I the only place you could really have surgery was in Melbourne. So I moved from Queensland to Melbourne to go through the 2-year program. Like, the thing is, nothing had really changed much from 1973, was it, Elizabeth, when you went through it?
72.
1972 to 1994, not a lot had changed. They didn't want you to be, you know, they wanted you to fit you into a little mold. You have to be this kind of woman. So yeah, I just wanted to say that while things are moving to some degree, and I think maybe they're moving faster now, we still have a lot of cisgendered white people in power that are really the gatekeepers. And that's sort of what upset me about the film last night as well. It's a lot of white cisgendered men who, and not even sometimes, you know, well, not even gay or lesbian people that are sort of making these regulations and stuff and putting people through these horrible traumatic treatments. So really, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's come before me, Elizabeth, Kylar, Claudia, hi. And yeah, I'm so grateful. And my heart really goes out to everyone else involved with the film as well. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that.
Thank you so much, Tony. So I'm going to drop some stuff in the chat for everybody now. This was an amazing conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm also in the community. I'm trans, and I'm so just grateful to be here and to witness this. So now that everyone has seen the film and participated in our Q&A, we would love for you to continue to be part of the CURED and the Outwards communities. So you can check out the links that are there if you want to donate to support the work of Outwards. And then I've also put in the chat all of the social media links for Outwards and for CURED, so you can keep up with everybody. And I will give everybody sorry, Patrick, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
before
thank you, Lex. Thank you, Lex, for leading the way tonight. And again, thank Outwards for sponsoring this event. It's been a really fantastic discussion. And just want to plug that CURED will be broadcast nationally on PBS this October. So keep an eye out for that and spread the word when that's there. So thanks everyone for joining.
So exciting. And everybody who's in here still, I'm going to give you the ability to unmute if you would like to say goodbye as you head out. Go ahead, everyone.
I'm going.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.